of his nearness. An awareness of his nearness. An awareness of his nearness. We're making people aware that God is near. God is no longer far off. When we were in sin, yes, he was far off. We couldn't reach him. But now he's come near because of what Christ has done. And we just have to become aware of that. When you're out there during the week, your life takes over and we forget that he's near. Worries, problems, anxieties, fears. And then when we come into church, we are reminded again, hey, don't forget, God is near. And that's what our job is as worship leaders. Remind everybody that God is near. We lose an awareness when we're facing life. Right? If you go out to work and you've got problems and your marriage is having a hard time and your kids are playing up and you haven't got enough money, does God stop being near? No, you just lose the awareness that he's near because our problems suddenly become bigger. So our job is to keep on becoming more aware of God. Yes? Let's call that God awareness. Our job, we've got to be more God aware. When you're aware of God, you are aware that he's all around you all the time. When you go talk to people, if you're aware of God, you see God. You get his heart. Yeah? We all want to be that person that's so God aware that when you go and talk to people, you can see through them. You know, you can walk into any situation and discern the heart of God. You know, the mind of God. The Bible says we have the mind of Christ. He's given us the deposit of the Holy Spirit. We want to be those people that can walk up to people and see it and say, hey, your mum is going to be healed. You know, or I know that you woke up, you had a dream last night, but this is what God says. We all want to be those people, right? But do we want to put the time in to become that God aware? Because that just doesn't happen like a magic trick. That happens as you become more intimate with God. It's called oneness with him. Being one with God is becoming so aware of him that you have no awareness of yourself. What was the consequence of Adam and Eve sinning? It was to become self-aware. The more self-aware you are, the less God-aware you become. If you think about Adam and Eve when they were in the garden, you ever notice how you know, Libby mentioned that phrase, we were designed for worship. We've heard that a lot. For a long time I preached it. We were made for worship. And then I looked in the Bible and saw and wondered, if we were designed for worship, how come we never see Adam worshiping? Anybody ever wondered that? When you look in the Garden of Eden, you turn to page 1, Genesis 1, you don't see Adam and Eve worshiping. They're not jumping up and down, there's no singing. There's no sin, so there's no need for sacrifice. There's no altar. There's no bowing down. There's none of what we think we would call worship. What do we see them doing? Walking in the garden with God. Just walking and being with God. Isn't that just like... And because he had such this intimacy with God, just walking and talking and being. Because here's my thing. I don't think they needed to worship because they were already one with God. This is before sin. They didn't need to worship because they were already one with God. Isn't that God's ultimate goal? Oneness. Jesus prays for his disciples and said, Father, may they be one just as you and I are one. This whole deal is just to become one. So the bonus of being one is we get to do miracles. The bonus of being one is we get to discern his heart. We get to know his wisdom. The bonus of being one. But it's the end goal is not just to do a miracle and see into people's... Because you know with people like Simon the sorcerer, they wanted to do stuff and use the power for their own glory. Imagine if God gave us supernatural discernment to do things, but we used it for our own glory. Don't you know that people already do that in church today? You can discern the spirit of certain people, right? I'm hoping you're not looking at me like that. You can discern when somebody comes in to fleece the flock. It's horrible, right? It's horrible. Can we talk real today? Is that okay? Because you're from real churches, you're from real people. I'm looking around, I'm seeing some real people. I don't want to talk just church jargon. I want to talk real. The power of God is real. And so we've got to, if you're going to be a minister in God's church, then you have to be a minister with authority. And authority, you can fool people with some words and some jargon and some nice stuff, but you cannot fool the spiritual realm. When you're facing God, of course God can see through you, but you know who else? The demonic. The demonic realm can see through you. If you show up to someone who's got demonic influence, they will know, they will recognize Christ and you will not. That's why I don't want to just rock up with fancy discernment. I want to rock up with the authority and the oneness of the Holy Spirit of God in me. I want them to know that I carry Christ because I'm so aware of God. But the only way you can become God aware is to die to self-awareness. Okay, so Adam and Eve are walking and talking with God. They are without sin. There's no obstacle between them and God. Can you imagine what that would be like? You know how we spend time with God now and we can become attuned to Him. You know, yeah? If that's how close we can get to God now, you spend 3 days without having time with God, you start to lose your attunement. You start to lose your discernment. All of a sudden our world starts to scatter. And then we get back to Him, we spend some days, we fast, we pray, we read the Word, we pray in tongues, we get back to Him, we worship, and all of a sudden now we're feeling God again. Isn't that your God awareness and your self-awareness are just having this little fight, continuing to go on? You continue to worship God each day. You continue to spend time in His presence. You continue to get to know Him. You continue to obey Him when He says stuff, and your God awareness grows and grows and grows and grows. Jesus showed that. Jesus, apart from Adam, Jesus was the only guy that demonstrated to us that it's actually possible to get back to full God awareness. He even said, the Son only does what He sees the Father doing. That's God awareness. When Satan lied to Adam and said, hey, Adam and Eve, and said, listen, why did God say not to eat this stuff? They said, well, because we'll die. He said, no, you're not going to die. Go ahead. Because there's more. He lied to them and said, there's more. God's holding out on you. No, of course not. God, He'd given them everything. And He said that God's holding out on you and you will know right from wrong. And you'll become like Him. It's really interesting that He promised them knowledge of right and wrong. As soon as we ate the fruit, we started believing right was wrong and wrong was right. The very thing that He promised, we got the opposite. Amazing, eh? And when you look through the Bible, you see, man, we really do not know what's right and wrong. It's only by the Spirit of God, whenever God is with us, then we start to see things that are right. We get deceived by these spirits. We get deceived by our own flesh when we are self-aware. So they believe this stuff and they start, you know what proves it? As soon as they had sinned, they heard the sound of God coming in the garden and they were afraid. Why would you be afraid of a God that's showing you nothing but love? Already they started believing something that wasn't right. And so because they believed a lie and they believed that in the heart of God was anger and punishment. We've already seen from what Libby said, the heart of God was redemption and mercy. Jesus had already paid the price. So there was no need for them to feel angry. There was no need for them to feel threatened or guilty. They didn't need to feel scared of God because in His heart was mercy. Already paid for. So they believed a lie and they ran away with that lie in fear and hid behind a tree in shame. Why? Because they were self-aware. They looked down. This is really funny because they looked down As soon as they ate the fruit, they became ashamed. They looked down and they saw themselves naked. I'm sure it was a bit of a shock. Wow. You're like, well, what's that? You know when you tell that story, I don't know if anybody's ever been caught naked somewhere and you've got a story and you're telling your friends, man, maybe not in public, but, I got out of the shower the other day and I realized that the hall door was open, and then I looked and the outside door was open. And there was a courier standing there. And we tell the story and we say, and there I was in all my glory. Yes? There they were in all their glory, walking loud and proud through the Garden of Eden, not ashamed, but reflecting the glory of God. And then they sin, they realize they're naked, and they become ashamed of that which was their very glory only seconds before. Isn't that turning right and wrong upside down again? They become ashamed of that which was their glory. And then they try to recover that. You know how they try to recover it? With a bunch of leaves. We look at that. They're trying to regain the lost glory of God by stringing together a few leaves. That sounds stupid, right? We look at that and go, that's stupid. There's no way they can do that. But we do exactly the same thing. It's just our leaves have got more fancy. Your leaf might be your relationship, it might be your job, it might be your car, it might be your guitar, your fig leaf, maybe your hair, maybe your fashion. Your fig leaf is probably your wealth. A lot of people's fig leaves is their bank account. A lot of people's fig leaves. Here's a really scary one. Your fig leaf may be your ministry. Anything that adds substance or weight or glory to you could be a fig leaf. That needs to go. Anything you're hiding behind, that's not the real you. That's not the transparent, honest, naked, vulnerable you. When Jesus said to the woman at the well, and she said, how do I know where to worship? And he said, it's got nothing to do with where you worship. The Father is looking for worshippers who will worship in spirit and truth. Take away the fig leaves. Take away all the stuff, all the external stuff. And what am I left with? An honest, transparent, vulnerable me. Isn't that what he always wants? And that's how we get a God awareness, by getting rid of the self-awareness, by stopping to look out. We were never designed to be self-aware. We were designed to be like God, God-aware, outward, not inward. God is all out. He's always giving. We were never designed to look at ourselves and then become, as soon as you look at yourself, you start serving yourself. You notice that whenever you sin, you never do it for anybody else? When I have that third donut, I'm not doing it for anybody else's sake. That's for me. You think about it. Anytime you sin, it's never for somebody else. It's for you. It's to serve self. And as soon as you serve self, eventually you will become obsessed with self. The more self-aware you become, the less God-aware you are. Self-awareness eventually has to lead to self-obsession. Once you're obsessed with self, you ever been around those people that all they can do is talk about themselves? Yeah, don't look at your neighbor. Their whole world is themselves. You ask them how they're doing, but they will never ask you because they can't see it outside themselves. It's all about them. They have that competition, you're like, maybe they do ask you how you are, and you're like, oh man, yeah, I lost my job this week. And they're like, oh, I lost 2 jobs. You know what I'm saying? So there's always more on them. It's always more about me. Yeah, man, I lost my mother, this week. It's really, I remember when I lost my mum, it was a really hard time, and then they talk for 2 hours about how that time around how they lost their mum. But they're never concerned about you because they're obsessed with self. Isn't that self-awareness grown to self-obsession? As soon as you start down the line of sin, it has to grow. It never gets better. Sin never improves. When we talk about worship, man, it's got nothing to do with music. When we talk about worship, I'll say it again, this is what Libby said, but this is what I believe. I don't think we were designed for worship. I think we were designed for oneness. But sin messed that up, and worship is our way back to it. Worship is our way back to it. And the first step of worship coming back to God has got to be dying to self. Has got to be putting a death to the self-awareness and coming back to God awareness. See, because self-obsession, if you do that long enough, you will end up in self-deception. You are going to be completely deceived. I don't know if you've ever been around someone that's deceived. They make stuff up. They just believe stuff that's just not right. Guys get stuck in affairs and extramarital stuff, and they just think, no, it's okay because we pray together. Yeah, well, I'm talking real today, right? We're talking about people that get locked into addictions and all kinds of stuff, and they just believe what they want to believe because they're deceived. Doesn't that come from self-serving? This is what I want, and so I will justify as much as I can with whatever I need to so I can have what I want. You know how we deal with young people all the time, but it's kind of when you're young, you know, somebody will have a word, oh, the Lord told me I'm going to marry you. Right? And you're like, as a young person, I don't think that's super self-deceived. I just think that's learning. You're learning the voice of God and you're learning the voice of your own flesh. When you get someone that's 45 years old and says that, now they're deceived. Yeah, okay, again, I'm looking at real people. There's some young people, there's some older people, it might be more experienced people in the room. The deception is a scary thing. To see someone who started at self-serving, went on to self-obsession, and then ended up in self-deception. There's only one more step, and it has to lead to self-destruction. The Old Testament is pretty clear on this. When you try to think, man, what is it that worship is really about? If you think, well, if that's the path of sin, then we've got to reverse that. The path of sin always starts with being self-aware. Man, look at me. I need to go put some glory on. So I'm just going to go get a fig leaf, and then we put that on. Let's say one of us decides to do that, and we find it, like myself, my fig leaf when I was 14 years old, I was insecure, I had a wounded spirit, I had an angry dad, I had I was very soft and very sensitive, and so it left me wounded. And so I looked for my fig leaf in music. I realized that I was a good guitar player. Yeah? So that was my fig leaf when I was 14 years old. If only somebody could have pointed me towards God and said, you don't need to do or play or act just to get approval. If only somebody had said your self-worth is highly valuable and precious because God made you that way. You don't have to do anything. If I could just have the arms of a father. You feeling that? If I could just have that. But instead, I didn't. And so I learned to win approval. And then eventually, around 15 or so, I discovered that girls thought I was okay looking. So then it went from music, and my fig leaf grew now, to, hey, if I can just attract girls, I can get way more approval. And then 15 years of my life wasted. Looking, because self-awareness suddenly turned to self-obsession, and then deception. And that deception, unanswered, led to a bunch of other stuff and a bunch of problems that came from it. Libs and I had to work through a bunch of stuff because it was heading towards self-destruction. because I hadn't got back to the original problem of self-awareness. Once I realized it and said, Lord, this is not right. I need to stop serving self, stop believing that lie that I believed right in the first place. And then I need to come back to awareness of God and His truth. Is that not worship? To come back and go, God, here I am again. This is that 14-year-old kid. Oh, I wonder how many of us could just take off our outer old skin and say, hey, here's the 15-year-old kid, here's the 5-year-old girl, here's the 7-year-old boy that got hurt and ended up on a path of self-awareness. Lord, I need to come back to you and be vulnerable and worship in spirit and truth and give away my will and my fig leaves and my approval and the things that I've done for glory. Isn't this all? That to me is worship. I think it's really awesome that when Libby says, what song are you singing? What song does your life sing? I think it's such how loud is your life? I think it's such a beautiful picture of how our life can speak, because we minister through our spirits. How many are in ministry, worship ministry? You don't have to be, I'll be proud. If you're in ministry, in any sort, actually who's in any kind of ministry? Okay, everybody should be putting their hand up because you're all in ministry. That was a trick question. We don't minister through our gifts. And I know we say it's a music ministry, or it's a ministry of hospitality, or a ministry of mowing lawns. It's whatever it is. I know the word ministry is to minister, is to work, but in Christian ministry, you don't minister through your gifts, you minister from your spirit, through your gifts. It doesn't matter what I'm doing, the same spirit that I have will minister. The spirit that I have and what I carry within my spirit will minister through music, it will minister through teaching, it will minister through preaching, it will minister through how I raise my kids. That same spirit will minister how we have our marriage. When I'm hanging out with people, when I'm having coffee with people, when I'm being a school principal back at home, what's in my spirit is what ministers. It's a really scary question to ask, but if you were to ask the people around you, what is it that they walk away with after they've spent time with you? That'll be the answer to what you're ministering. So, if I don't carry the Spirit of God with me, what am I ministering? If I haven't got to that point where I am in spirit and truth and vulnerable and open and transparent with the Holy Spirit of God and one with Him, then I'm still holding on to my fig leaves. And that's what I minister to other people. So, if I was still that 14-year-old kid playing guitar for approval, and I was in your ministry team, then you would put me on the platform, and it's that self-approval, self-seeking looking approval kid that I will be ministering. Yeah? So how do you fix that 14-year-old kid? One, you don't, for a start. Jesus does. But we've got to grow a culture in our team that leads to a place of God awareness. We've got to grow a culture in all our ministry teams that leads to that place of Jesus' truth and Jesus' love, His unconditional love, and Jesus' wholeness, the foundation that's laid by the apostles and the prophets, the mystery of God revealed, Christ. You know what's so awesome about Jesus? Greatest song ever written. Greatest worship song ever written. Not my will, but yours. When Adam and Eve faced the decision to eat the fruit, they basically said, Lord, not your will, but mine. It makes sense that for Jesus to come and to show us the way back to true worship, He enters the garden, He struggles with flesh. He struggles with it all. And through his tears, he said, Lord, but not my will, but yours. Imagine if we woke up every day saying, not my will, but yours. Imagine if you applied that to every decision you make. Father, not my will, but yours. Lord, where should I work? Not my will, but yours. What should I do with my time? Not my will, but yours. What should I do with my money? Not my will, but yours. Tough call, right? Who should I marry? Not my will, but yours. Please bring me a really good one. I got the best. Thank you. Isn't that incredible? Don't you think that's the greatest worship song you could sing every day if you got up and said, not my will but yours? It doesn't matter what song you sing then. If you get up on the stage and sing Beautiful Name or sing Holy Spirit or sing Jump Up and Down, sing Happy Birthday, if you've got that song in your spirit, not my will but yours, then it will minister. If you're still struggling with fear, anxiety, worry, with lust, with any kind of problem, and that's what's in your spirit, when you get up, you can sing Beautiful Name, you can sing Jump Up and Down, you can sing all that stuff, but out of your spirit will come all that stuff. That's why worship, really true worship, has got to be about the people more than the song. You've got to develop your team so they have an understanding of what real, true worship is. God gave me this understanding. I mean, I've been teaching on worship for 30 years almost. And a few years ago, he gave me this understanding. I opened the Bible. Actually, a friend of mine called one day and said, she's quite prophetic. And she said, hey, listen, I was praying this morning and the Lord dropped you on my mind and said, you need to go and spend time in the Word because he wants to download some stuff to you. And I was like, yeah, okay, thanks, cool. I will. And then I didn't. Because, muso. And so I just, eventually we found ourselves, we have a Bible college in Denmark that we often go to. And we were there for a week. And I pulled out my normal stuff that I was going to teach. But because we were there for a week, I thought, I better go look for something fresh. And as I opened the Word, it was like the Matrix, where God, put something in the back of my head and downloaded, a whole bunch of stuff. You ever seen the Matrix? Yeah. And I just could not stop reading the Bible all night long. I just saw this thread throughout the whole Old Testament of glory and of worship and of sacrifice and coming back to Him to oneness. All of that stuff. He shoved it. He just downloaded all this stuff, and in the morning I knew worship kung fu. I just knew it all. It was amazing, and that's basically what I've written in that book. When you start to look at all the people and what they've been through, and you start to look at all the stories, you suddenly realize, man, what have we been doing in church today? Why have we been wasting our time just playing songs? Let's do more than play songs. Let's come back to a real definition of worship. You want a quick run through the Old Testament? Quick run through. You ready? Here we go. Adam and Eve, right? We know about them. It's oneness. They walked with God. They have Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel, and in place of him they have Seth. Seth has a son named Enosh. Right after Enosh is born, there's this cool little line at the end of Genesis chapter 4 which says, "In that day people began to call upon the name of the Lord." Right? People began to call upon the name of the Lord. And I was telling the guys last night we were meeting with, I thought, what does that mean? They began to call upon the name of the Lord. Up until that, what had they been doing up until then? Because during this time, Adam and Eve had been speaking to God. They didn't need to call upon his name because he's right there. Cain is a murderer and a liar. He lied to God, and yet he still got to speak to him face to face. I've never killed anybody. I don't get to talk to God face to face. Anybody? Anybody talk to God face to face? No? Why? How come? That's not fair. Here, I think it only took one generation, and eating a piece of fruit turned to murder, and self-awareness started to grow. By the time it gets down to another generation, then another generation, only took that, it didn't take very long before self-awareness grows so big and God awareness starts to diminish more and more and more. Now the people are standing out there going, hey, where's God gone? God hasn't gone anywhere. It's just our self-awareness has grown so much. We're so self-serving and so self-obsessed that we are not aware of God anymore, which is so amazing why what Libby said is so true. We've got to remind people of an awareness of his nearness, an awareness that he's there. So Enosh then, it starts a really bad habit. But it's a good thing in some ways because they then gather together. They go, listen, people began to call upon the name of the Lord. It's a really important reason for us to gather together as the church. Just to remind ourselves every Sunday that God is still here. Isn't that why we gather? It'd be awesome if every one of us could wake up every day and go, hey, God's here. But we need each other to encourage each other. So every Sunday we gather together, every Wednesday or Thursday, we have home groups, we have life groups, we have time together. We gather together as the church, corporately, to remind one another and to call upon the name of the Lord. To say, God is here, God is near. Our God awareness starts to grow. Enosh kind of gives way to Genesis 5, and then there's a bunch of names and their sons. Cool? Bunch of names. Father, son, father, son, father, son. It's quite boring if you're just kind of reading names and numbers, but a couple of names stand out. One is this guy, Enoch. When it says about Enoch, it says Enoch lived to be this long and he was this old when he had his son. And then it says this one extra line where it says Enoch walked with God and then disappeared because God took him away. I think that's so beautiful when you think about God's heart. The last time someone walked with him was Adam in the garden. And he missed it so much until Enoch finally walked with him again after generations. We're talking generations. And it meant so much to him that he took him away without tasting death. How awesome is that? And then it gets to the bottom of that list, and it gets to the bottom, and there's a dude named Noah. We recognize Noah because of the flood and the ark. But God didn't choose him because of his boat building skills. He chose him because of one line it says next to him. It says Noah walked with God. And he was blameless among his contemporaries. His father, Lamech, had prophesied over him, actually. And it said, this one will bring comfort to the painful toil of our hands because of the ground that was cursed. The first consequence of us sinning was to become self-aware. The second was, of course, God kicked them out of the garden. Now they had to work for a living. Painful toil. By the sweat of your brow shall the earth yield its fruit, God says to him. Now there's labor for childbirth and painful toil for the man as we have to suddenly scrape together a living. You know, we weren't designed for that. We were designed not to painfully toil, but to operate in supernatural grace. That's how we're supposed to operate. The same Spirit that created the universe, God breathes into us so that we can, like Libby said, create worlds with our words. It's incredible when you start to see Adam naming animals. God never said, hey, I want you to name the animals. He just said, I'm going to bring animals in front of you to see what you would name them. It's a different angle. If you understand that God has just created the universe with his words and his Holy Spirit has gone out to create. Now, he breathes that same Spirit into a lump of clay, into a lump of dust. And then he says to Adam, okay, now I'm going to see how this Spirit that's in you, which is the same as in me, can go out and start to create as well. Let's bring this thing in front of him and see what he comes out with. And he prophesies. And whatever he named it, that's what it became. Is this kind of wish? Is that making sense to you? It's incredible when you think, how powerful are we when we prophesy the word of God? This is important. How powerful can we be when we prophesy the word of God? If we are one with God, we are recognizing His Spirit, we are discerning, and then we speak out what we see. Are we not creating like God created? We still do it. Non-Christians still do it. Even if you're not a Christian, if you want a pair of shoes, you will get that pair of shoes. Your spirit will go out and create it. Your spirit will go out and start to make it happen. You'll start scheming. How can I get this? How can I save some money? How can I borrow some money? How can I go and get round to there? I could go for the sale. I'm going to get online. I'm going to look for the Facebook sales. Right? Your spirit goes out to create the environment so that you end up with that pair of shoes. If that's the power that we have as unredeemed people, imagine with the Spirit of God in us, and we speak out, there shall be victory over this situation. Yes? If that's the power we have, shouldn't that be the very power that we use when we're leading worship? My job as a worship leader is not just to play songs and sing. It's to prophesy. There shall be victory. Sometimes I'll say it, sometimes I'll sing it. There's going to be victory. Right? Sometimes you've got to sing it. But it's the same discernment. My job more than anything else, as any minister in the church, is to prophesy. Okay, we get to Noah. Noah's in the boat for a year, a whole year. It rained for 40 days, 40 nights, but actually by the time that they built it, they get everybody on it, it rains, and then they're looking for dry land. By the time they actually opened the doors and got back out, it was a whole year of being stuck in that boat with stinky elephants. And then they get out of the boat, and the first thing Noah does is build an altar, worship. That's awesome. When you think about God about to lay waste to the planet because nobody even recognizes that He exists. How do you get from Adam and Eve, who are one with God, to a planet full of people who don't even recognize that He exists? And it's like God saying, I can see Him kind of about to do it. Do I really have to do this? Man, I'm about to lay it. Sin and self-awareness has taken over the whole planet. No one even knows I'm here. I'm just going to have to wipe them out and start again. And like a mother going on holiday thinking, did I leave the stove on? He comes back and checks one more time. You sure there's nobody? Looks over and sees one guy still worshiping. Noah, still walking with God. I think Noah deserves way more credit than we give him. Because without him, it would all be fish food. Yeah? Then when he gets out of the boat, he worships. And he builds that altar and he worships. And the incense rises to heaven. It pleases God. And God responds with a rainbow. A promise. And a promise that said, never again will I curse the ground or flood the earth. The curse was broken. The curse of painful toil was broken. We don't have to painfully toil anymore. I think it started a bad habit in mankind about toiling. If you find yourself painfully toiling, scraping to get through life, then you're not doing it in supernatural grace. We need to get back to God and find that grace again. Because anybody looks on at us and sees us painfully toiling, it's no different to their life. Right? We should be operating in the grace of God. There should be favor over our lives. There should be that sense of, man, even though I walk through tough times, I reach to God and I'm in constant communion with Him. Jesus went through a tough time. But His answer was, not my will, but yours. And that dude did every miracle you can think of. And he even said, man, my people are going to do greater things than these. Are you doing greater things? I ain't. But I'm heading there, man. That's my constant prayer and desire, so I could get to that point of oneness with him, that I can continue. Whew, I gotta move. Gotta move. Come on. Stop holding me up. All right. The people grow again, and they repopulate, and they move out to these plains, and then they get to a point where they are once again feeling scattered. Why? Because without God, our lives just start to come apart. And so there they are, once again, feeling like, man, we don't know who we are, we have no identity, we have no glory, they're feeling ashamed, they're feeling hurt. So instead of returning to God, they return to the curse of painful toil and decide, let's build something. It's what guys do especially. Dudes, hey, when we run into problem, let's go build something. Let's make something. Let's build a business. Let's build an army. Let's build a drum kit. Let's build a car. Let's build a woodshed. You know, that's what we do. Chicks at least talk to each other. You know, they don't do anything. They just complain and talk and drink coffee. But they comfort each other and there's nurture. You know, it's not dudes. We just isolate and go build something. That's what we do. It's painful toil. Instead of returning to God, they built a tower. They built a whole city. And some of the things that they said were, let us make a name for ourselves. One translation says, let us establish ourselves. You can see them saying, hey, we need to get ourselves together and give ourselves an identity so that we can feel complete. And God says, hey, this is not good. If they get to the point of feeling complete and they achieve all this in unity, then it's not good for them. And I remember thinking, wait, nothing will be impossible for them. What's wrong with that? Isn't that a good thing? No, because if you get to that point where you feel complete within yourself without God, I can't think of a better definition of pride than that. To think oneself complete without God. Isn't that the ultimate of self-sufficiency? The ultimate in self-awareness. And so God says this is not good for them to do that, because if they keep on doing, nothing will be impossible. They'll feel whole, they'll feel complete, they'll feel together, and they will do it without me. And that can only lead to self-destruction. So out of his love, he says, clearly I'm going to need to grow up people that do come back to me. And so he picked one guy and said, Abraham, come away from the land of your fathers. Those were his fathers. After the story of the Tower of Babel, there's only one chapter of names again. Fathers, sons, fathers, sons, fathers, sons. It gets to the bottom of there, and then Abraham is called. God's son. I wonder, actually, if God called every person before Abraham since the tower. Because it says Terah, his father, was on his way to Canaan when he got stuck in Haran. I wonder if he called Terah. But he got stuck because of sin, because of grief. His son died, Abraham's brother. And I wonder if he just got stuck there. And I wonder how many of us God is calling all the time, but we get stuck in our grief, we get stuck in our habits, we get stuck in our way, and we don't say yes to the call of God. And Abram finally says, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And because of that, he then goes on a walk. Abram, the father of our faith, walks with God, a walk of faith. Finally. Nobody had used faith since Noah. So this is a new thing. God says, hey, I want you to leave the land of your fathers. I want you to leave that way of thinking. I want you to leave the painful toil behind. I want you to come back to me and show the world what it's like to live a life with me. A life of faith. A life of true worship. And so Abram, he had this amazing, there's so much, I could talk to you all day about Abraham. But he had this one amazing story where he had been promised the descendants and the nations that are going to come out of him, but of course he has no kids. And so he complains to God, but this is like 10 years later. God gives him a promise, and then 10 years later he complains. Most of us are like 5 minutes and we complain. But whatever. Who's had a dream from God and it hasn't come true yet? Come on, be honest. Who's had a dream from God and it hasn't come true yet? Don't stop believing. Just don't stop believing. Keep believing, because that's faith. Abram had this amazing dream where once he complained to God, and God said, don't worry about it. Just get outside the tent. Go out and look up and you'll see stars. When you see the stars, that's how much your descendant's going to be. Because when you're in the tent, all you can see is what's in front of you. I bet he was in the tent with his wife, Sarai, who hadn't been able to have kids, and she was complaining at him. I bet she was complaining at him. Abraham, you need to do something. When a wife says to her husband, you need to do something, the husband feels it. But he's feeling that pressure, and he turns to God and says, Lord, help me. And then God says, get outside the tent and look up. Get away from that perspective. Isn't worship, when we're bringing people in from the outside, they come into here, isn't it our job to get them outside of the tent? To look up to the stars again? To look up to God, and God says, hey, my perspective is way bigger than yours. Isn't that our job? And so he says to Abram, yeah, listen, everything's going to happen, and I'll prove it by making a promise with you, by making a covenant with you. And he gets a bunch of animals, chops them in half, and it all means the covenant thing. And God makes a promise not with Abram, but with himself. You know when God makes a promise with himself, you know it's going to happen. Abram, as humans, we can give up on the covenant. You know the difference between a promise or a contract and a covenant? You can break a contract, but a covenant breaks you. Right, I won't explain that now. Covenant breaks you, man. You don't break that. And God said, I'm going to make a covenant not with you, but with myself. And Hebrews is full of that, where it says God made an oath to himself that what he said to Abram was going to happen. And what he told him was, you're going to have a bunch of kids, and Isaac's going to come, and then Jacob's going to happen. Not Esau, but Jacob is the one. And then Jacob has a bunch of kids. How many kids does he have? 12 kids, and one of them was named Joseph. Right, and Joseph takes the people into Egypt. Yeah, and then there's an amazing line that said, after your people will go down to a land that's not their own, and there they will be oppressed for 400 years. But then I will judge that nation, and they will leave it with great wealth. And then I'm going to bring them back here to this land, which is Canaan, where he was, for the sin of the Amorite is not yet complete. And I remember thinking, what does that mean? For the sin of the Amorite is not yet complete. I was thinking, yeah, I can see that. You have 1, 2, 3, 4 generations, and they go in, and he says something about the 4th generation, they're going to come back. But they're there for 400 years, and then they come back to Canaan. And Joshua is the guy that takes them back in there. But he said, because the sin of the Amorite, how long is that? That's 400 years there, plus these 3 guys. You're talking, that's a long prophecy. Imagine if I said to Pete, hey, listen, I have a word for you. In about 900 years, your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson is going to cross the road and build a church. This is pretty massive. But when God makes a promise to himself, you know what's going to happen. So when he calls, the reason he said the sin of the Amorite is not yet complete, I'm thinking, I asked myself, well, who are the Amorites? The Amorites are basically Canaanites. When Noah had when Noah came out of the boat, he heard this embarrassing little story about when he got drunk. Right? He probably wants to keep that on the down low. But he got drunk, and then he fell over. He fell over naked in his tent. Right, there's that whole nakedness in all its glory. And his son Ham came in and saw him naked. And now, without reverence, there's a whole bunch of theories around what he did, but we know at least there was no reverence, there was no respect, because I can see him walking out to the other 2 brothers outside, saying, check out the old man, wasted. Right? And the other two, with respect, walking backwards, holding a cloak, and they cover his nakedness. When Noah gets up and hears about what Ham had done to him, it said he cursed not Ham, but Canaan. And we're like, wait, Canaan wasn't even there. Canaan's his grandson. Why would he curse Canaan? Because the flood had just wiped everybody out, but it's only an external measure to try and wipe out sin. But we know that sin is not external, it's internal. So God is saying, so I can see Noah thinking, okay, God wiped out externally, but there's still the seed of sin internally. And I can see that. The depravity of sin is in my son Ham. If it's in him, I go down another generation, I can see it growing. How much more so in my grandson and in his line. So when it said he cursed him, the word is more like prophesy. I'm prophesying. And he says, Canaan shall be lower than his brothers. The idea of being lower than. There's always that seed of sin. There's always the depravity of man, the lowness of man. There's always going to be there, shown in the Canaanites, and eventually the Amorites, the Girgashites, all the ites, the Vegemites and whatnot. You notice that when Lot gets kidnapped, it's by 5 Amorite kings. Those Amorites and Canaanites were all together, and why? Because the land of Canaan eventually, you know, the Canaanites throughout the whole Old Testament become like the arch enemies of the people of God. Always lower. And so where does God send Abram? But to Canaan, the center of sin. Doesn't it make sense? God says, I'm going to grow a people out of this one guy. And where am I going to grow him? Right in the center of sin. And he says, I'm going to grow your people. Eventually they'll end up in Egypt, but then I'm going to bring them back. Because right now, sin hasn't grown to its greatest strength. I'm going to wait until it's grown to full maturity. Then I'm going to bring my people back, and they're going to smash it. And it shows us, as a lesson to the rest of us right now, God's power to overcome sin at its greatest. It's way more than whatever Satan can throw at you. That makes sense to everybody? Man, it's just an incredible thing to think. God, wait, so by the time he calls Moses and Joshua, this fight is fixed. And he says to Joshua, don't be afraid. Be strong. Be brave. Every time an angel appears, every time he says something to Joshua, it's always, be strong, Joshua. Go in there. Why? Because I've been waiting for 1,000 years for this fight. And I fixed it 1,000 years ago. It's going to happen. You are going to go in and you are going to win. Which it must have been so frustrating the first time they got there, and they were all like, oh, they were big, we can't do it. And God said, get out in the desert for another 40 years and come back, and then we'll see. Right? So when God says to you, don't be afraid. When God says to you, I can conquer, you are a conqueror. And he means it. You don't have to cower. You don't have to go, oh, but it looks too scary. We are like grasshoppers in their sight. When he said to Moses, I love about this, such a long promise. When he said to Moses, come, I've heard the cry of my people, I want you to go back and pull them out of Egypt. And he says to them, to God, who are you? He doesn't say, man, I'm your God. He says, I'm the God of your father Abraham. I'm the God of Isaac. I'm the God of Jacob. He's letting him know his own ancestry. This is who you belong to. This is who you came from. You've forgotten it. But I'm letting you know that I've always kept an eye on it. Because I've had a long promise with myself. It's never going to run out. When I say something, it's going to happen. That's the righteousness of God. And then that's amazing, eh? When they get into Canaan, okay, let's see if we can put this through in 10 minutes. Are you okay? Yeah. When they get into Canaan, eventually, after having been through Mount Sinai and the Ten Commandments and worship and through the wilderness, he says to them, listen, when you go into Canaan, whatever you do, do not marry foreign women, because they will lead you to worship foreign gods. So as soon as you say to a child, don't do something, what do? They do exactly that, and that's exactly what they did. It's like when he brought Moses up to Mount Sinai to give him the Ten Commandments, the one he said to the people, okay, I'm taking Moses up here, you guys stay down here, but whatever you do, don't make idols of silver and gold. And now, of course, they made a golden calf and worshipped it. And now they're going into Canaan. He says, don't marry foreign women, and so that's exactly what they did. And because of that, they ended up worshipping foreign gods. And so he allowed the enemies to come in on them, just to wake them up. Because they were self-aware, they got into self-obsession and self-deception, they were heading to self-destruction. So he allows the enemies to come in on them, and then the enemies come, and then they cry out to God, and then he raises a judge to come and deliver them. Yes? So then you've got all these judges, this cycle of sin, crying out to God, raising a judge to deliver them. Guys like Deborah and Barak and Barak and Samson and Gideon and whatnot. All these, just these judges over and over again. And it's only ever one thing that God's wanted. Just worship. It's all he's ever asked for, just worship. Pure worship. He didn't ask them, he didn't care about their sanitation policy. He didn't care about their education policy. All he ever wanted was worship. Just worship me and don't worship other gods. Is that too much to ask? But because of that, we go through all these judges, and finally this cool young dude named Samuel is in the temple, and he's the final judge. There's a guy named Eli that's the high priest, and he screwed up the worship as well, because his sons took over, and they were horrible, and they just didn't do it right, and they ended up losing the Ark of the Covenant to the Philistines, and God had to bring it back again. And during this time, this young prophet named Samuel then finally took over the temple, started leading people back to worshiping God. His message, he would have been the traveling guide of the time, wandering around the country saying, get rid of your false idols and come back to God. Sam was the man. And so, of course, when it came time for him and he got old, he handed his responsibilities over to his two sons. Unfortunately, his two sons did the same as Eli's two sons, and they corrupted the responsibility. Real shame, because then the people said, Sam, we love you, but we hate your sons. So instead, give us a king. And Samuel went to God and said, oh no, they hate me. And God said to Samuel, dude, it's not you. They've been doing this to me since the day I met them. They keep on rejecting me. They keep on rejecting. Just give him a king. And so we know about Saul, their first king. Epic fail. Saul was an epic failure of a king. It wasn't because God didn't set him up to fail. God set him up to win. You know what he said? He said, dude, when you leave here, you're going to come across a band of prophets. Right? He's the prophetic. When you're with the prophets, you will prophesy. And my spirit will come upon you. You will prophesy, and I will give you a new heart. And you will be like a new man. And whatever you do, go and do it, for I will be with you. That's awesome, right? That's God setting up to win. But instead, because he was self-aware, he was always insecure. And instead of pleasing God, he was more worried about the fear of man, and he pleased man instead. That's what a self-aware God does. Painfully toiling instead of going with God. And because of that, he screwed it up, and God rejected him and said, no, you had your chance, dude, but I'm getting rid of you, and I'm picking a guy after my own heart. A guy named David. We love David. David was incredible. David was a man after God's own heart. Finally, somebody that understood that worship is not about an external set of rules. When he became king, his first act was to get the tabernacle together again. Since Moses, the thing had fallen apart, and the ark was sitting in some stranger's house out in the middle of nowhere. And so he said, man, I know how important worship has been in my own life. This is the guy that would be out in the field shredding on his harp, and then he'd go beat up lions and bears. That's something else right there, if that's not supernatural. That's not painfully toiling. This guy that wrote all of the Psalms, when you read the Psalms and you think, man, David was honest. He was like way honest. Sometimes I'm like, dude, chill. Because it's like, he's really honest. But he's so intimate and he's so tender. Here's this guy strumming his harp, singing worship songs, and he was small and skinny, ruddy they call him, really good looking, right? He's like a little wuss. I'm sure Goliath thought he was a little girl, right up until the point he cut his head off. He wasn't a dude that would painfully toil. There's a guy that operated in the supernatural grace of God. Why? Because he was a worshipper under with the heart of God. The same heart as God. One with God. I think it's amazing when you think that David knew what he knew about God. Because nobody was there to tell him. David was like Jesus, and then he broke all the rules. We look at the New Testament for our model of church, but really, David was New Testament. David's when things started again. David suddenly brought into, when he set up worship, he said, man, worship is so important. We've got to get our worship right. So my first act as king, I'm going to get the ark, I'm going to bring it into Jerusalem, I'm going to set it up again. So he sets it up, and this time he added stuff. He added music. God never said, thou shalt have music in your church. He never said that. It's just something we choose to use. David chose to use it because it's a really powerful tool. But we can't treat music as spiritual. Let me say that again. You don't treat music as spiritual. It's something you use for good or bad. It's like saying language is spiritual. It's just something you use to communicate. It can be powerful. It can be used for spiritual means, but it's not spiritual in itself. It's just a vehicle. So he adds music, and then he puts 3 guys in charge of all his music, and he says to the guys, and this is the spiritual part, I want you to prophesy to the accompaniment of music. There it is again, prophesy. That's our job, prophesy. Discern, Lord, what do you want to say to us as a church today? And then sing that song, however that comes out. You can sing a written song, you can sing a spontaneous song, you can play music and try and capture that. But what does music sound like that's supposed to say victory? Hey, at least that. And then if I just say the word victory over it, you get the idea. Victory. Hey, right? As soon as I said, all I did was bang on a chair. But it enhanced the message. If I go, victory. Our music it's got to enhance the moment. So it's such a powerful tool. It's like sometimes I see people singing like up the front, and it's like, I'm a conqueror. Everything about them is not saying I'm a conqueror. When we sing, you've touched my heart, and like nobody else, you've touched my heart like no one else. Yeah. I know there's some kind of cultural things. I'm looking around this room, there's a bunch of cultures. Every country I've been to, there's always somebody that says, I hope you don't mind if we're not that expressive, because it's just our culture. I think, wow. You all put you in front of the sports field, put you in front of food, you'll see your passion come out. Give the old people a grandchild. Hey, there we go. Then we see some expression. But when we're in church, do you love the Lord? Do you love the Lord? I'm going to get myself in trouble on time. I was like that too. There was a point where I was in worship, I was like this. Because I was, especially when we were in youth ministry. Because when you're in youth ministry, you're just way too cool for me. We were, I don't know, mid-20s or something, and we were in a church service somewhere, and the worship leader got up and said, "Hey, everybody pull out your keys and jingle your keys for Jesus." And I was like, I ain't jingling for nobody. What am I, 12? That's what I thought. Because I thought, no, Lord, you know me. You know that I'm way too cool for that stuff. That's for the youth. Right? That's for the youth to do. I'm way more holy than that now. So I did that thing that a lot of young guys do. We do we don't want to appear as though we are rebellious, so we just kind of halfway. Everybody was going, "Yay, jingle, jingle," and I was like, Hey, you know that guy. And it's because I'm trying to get away with. I'm trying to keep my dignity. I'm trying to keep some coolness. And what does that say to God? I'm sure God was there going, "Wayne, you're so cool, man. You just make me feel so treasured, so loved and adored. You just give away everything for me. Yeah, man, I would much rather bless you than everybody else." We were in this one place, right? Another church in Pittsburgh, and it's a worship conference, and the bishop in charge, it's his conference. He's a real worship kind of figure, and he loves networking a whole bunch of people. And so normally at a conference you get 5 or 6 kind of speakers, maybe 4 or 5 even. He had like 30 like worship artists and clinicians and speakers and stuff. And so they took up the whole 2 front rows. And we were sitting there in the second row, right in the aisle. And the guy got up to lead worship, and it was Israel Houghton, actually. He got up to lead worship, and he got up here and said, "Okay, hey guys, just come down and fill up the front." It's not that big a church. It's quite small, and so he just kind of said, "Come on up and fill the front." I kind of went to move. I thought, maybe we should, but when you're when you're the speaker at a conference, you kind of think that applies to everybody but you. That's for the youth and the delegates and the crazy people, right? They'll be the ones that come up with the flags and jump around. And so I was there sitting there thinking, well, maybe I should go because we're the experts, we're the trained professionals. But you know why I didn't? Peer pressure. None of the others did. So I thought, no, maybe we shouldn't. And I felt like a Pharisee. I felt so convicted. That night, I couldn't sleep. I was like, man, what? I was thinking, from God's point of view, He's there saying, man, I've got so much to give, and I'm looking for someone that will worship me in spirit and truth, that's abandoned, that's just there. Who am I going to notice? The guy up the front totally giving himself out, or the dude in the second row looking after his dignity? So I was just like, this is crazy. And in the morning I repented, and when the different worship leader got up and said, hey, come down the front, I was the first one there, right up the front. Because I wanted God to notice me. I wanted God to go, yeah, I want everything you got, never mind everybody else. I'm joking. You feeling me? There's got to be this thing that we throw away our pride. What's going to stop us from receiving everything God has for us? Our pride. We've got to get rid of that. That's why praise is so important. David was a man of praise. David was awesome. David had an incredible effect on God. God loved him.